It's hard to believe January is over and the spring garden is getting ready to jump into full swing. I, for one, have been both excited and a little hesitant to get going because this is the first season I really feel like I'm getting the timing right. I know exactly what I want to plant as well as when to plant those crops in a way that's going to allow me to both maximize my harvest and extend my season. In this episode, we're going to talk about the crops you can plant in your early spring garden to get the most out of your garden space. Welcome to the Garden Things with Friends podcast. We're here to show that building a thriving garden is possible for everyone, even those with busy schedules and long to-do lists. I'm Ashley, your host, and 2 years ago, I turned my garden dreams into reality in my suburban backyard. Through trial and error over the next 2 seasons, I've created a thriving garden that I absolutely love. My goal is to inspire you to create your dream garden too. So let's grow together. Hey y'all, and welcome to episode 8 of the Garden Things with Friends podcast. Today, I want to share a list of crops that you can grow in your spring garden. But before we jump right into that list, I want to talk about the concept of the spring garden. Now, when most of us think about garden crops, we think peppers, cucumbers, tomatoes, and eggplants, which are started in the spring, but these crops don't actually take off until later into the spring and into the summer. A spring garden, on the other hand, it's going to include crops that we'll be talking about later in the episode, and it's what really allows you to get a jump start on your garden season. Now, this process of seasonal gardening feeds into the concept of the 3 or 4 season garden, which is a way to extend your garden harvest from about 10 weeks before your frost date to well after your frost date with succession planting. And succession planting it basically has 2 different definitions. It can either be the act of planting multiple rounds of the same crop throughout the season, or it's planting crops that thrive in different environments, one after the other, and this is going to extend your harvest. So how do we know what are the right crops to choose? When we're planning our spring garden, it is important to consider various factors such as your climate, your soil type, and sunlight. These elements are going to play a crucial role in determining which crops are going to thrive in your garden. But this is even more important when we're thinking about our spring garden because we are just now getting into a space where we have more sun from the winter. So in our spring garden, we're going to be choosing crops that are going to be able to withstand the potential for frost and freeze. And spring gardens are often planted in the late winter before your estimated last frost date. Now, many of these crops on our list are going to be plants that can be planted in our spring garden, and they are all frost hardy. These are going to be plants that are typically unbothered by the cold of late winter and early spring. Now, frost hardy just means that it's a plant that can withstand light frost. This is typically between 28 and 32 degrees without being damaged. And this is going to make these plants ideal for planting in the early spring when our temperatures are fluctuating and there is that potential for frost or freezes. Now, this differs from the plants of the late spring or what we think of as our summer garden, which are typically going to be frost tender, and these are all planted after the danger of frost. Now, another thing to consider when we're choosing our crops is the relative time it takes for you to get from seed to harvest. Especially if you're planning to succession plant summer crops, you want to be mindful of when you're going to need that garden space for your summer plants like tomatoes, peppers, and eggplant. All right, now that we have a better understanding of how to choose the right crops for our spring garden, let's take a look at some popular options. Now, in order to keep this episode bite-sized as far as information goes, I'm going to divide these crops into 5 categories, and we will discuss those categories as a whole. But you can check out the show notes and the link to the accompanying blog post for more information on the care of each of those crops. The 4 categories that we're going to be discussing are roots, greens, brassicas, and generally others. And we're going to start with our root vegetables. Now, root crops are going to be things like carrots, beets, turnips, radishes, onions, and potatoes. And these are hardy plants and can withstand really cold temperatures. They offer a variety of flavors, colors, and nutritional benefits. And to grow them successfully, it's important to provide well-draining soil, very loamy soil with consistent moisture and proper spacing. If you harvest at the right time, this is going to ensure you get the best taste and long-term storage. And I'd also like to note that radishes are one of the faster maturing crops in the garden. So this is a great crop to grow to get a boost of confidence as a beginner. For leafy greens, we have crops like Swiss chard, spinach, arugula, and lettuce. And these are going to offer a variety of flavors and nutrients. Swiss chard is actually kind of like beets, so it's going to be sort of earthy, sweet flavor. Arugula is going to add a peppery kick, and lettuce is going to offer crispness and mildness. Now, these greens can be grown in different seasons and harvested regularly to provide a continuous supply of fresh greens. But it's imperative to know that the warmth of summer can cause these leafy greens to undergo a process called bolting, where they start focusing on producing seeds. Now, when this happens, the plant often loses all of its flavor and becomes really bitter. And this is really common with lettuce and spinach. Brassicas are going to be a group of cold-tolerant veggies, very nutrient-dense, and they are perfect for late winter and early spring. Cabbage, kale, kohlrabi, broccoli, and cauliflower are all among this type of vegetable, and they each have a unique flavor, and they're very rich in vitamins. And they thrive well in really well-draining soil. They are heavy feeders, and you have just so many options for delicious and healthy meals with these crops. I do want to note that they take a long time to mature, so it's recommended that you plant starts outside instead of sowing seeds. Additionally, in the warm climates like mine, broccoli and cauliflower are much better for fall crops because the heat generally causes them to bolt as well. Now, let's talk about the additional crops that can go in our spring garden. And this set of crops is going to include a lot of our herbs like parsley, leeks, celery, cilantro. Also includes peas and then flowers of pansies and nasturtium. These all bring excitement and variety to the garden. They offer a range of flavors and you can use them as garnishes, medicinally. They're going to thrive in a lot of different growing conditions, and they aren't generally very picky. And they have this added bonus of being great companion plants as for pest control and pollinator attracting. Okay, I hope you're as fired up as I am now to get my spring garden started. I hope this list of what to plant in the spring gets your mind working on how to create a garden that produces for you across multiple seasons. If you dug this episode, I would be honored if you would rate this podcast and spread the word to friends who are also passionate about gardening. Your 5-star support fuels the growth of Garden Things with Friends, and together we'll cultivate a network of thriving gardens and plant-loving friends. Happy gardening, and remember, it's never the wrong time to grow where you are.